So with the sensor certification program, we've been talking about this for quite some time. And really over the past 20, 24 years that I've been involved in ITS with Ohio DOT, um, sensors have come a long way. And, way back when we started out with just sensors trying to detect vehicles, and the vehicles would, you'd get a traffic count and you'd get, some speed or aggregated speed or density occupancy, or value. Um, the challenge today is we're trying to do so much more with these data sets with the sensor data and the sensors to support V2X applications. And so the current focus of V2X applications is largely broadcast information to motorists. The accuracy of that information beyond that of SPAT and MAP is currently not being focused on. Um, And why is this? Like, we have pretty good standards for SPAT and MAP, what those values and those messages have to be broadcast at, delivered to the RSU, what they have to include. But we don't know what level of accuracy is required or acceptable for sensors, and we don't have a good mechanism to easily measure it. So before we can get a good grasp on broadcasting J20 or 3224 sensor data sharing messages, we need to understand the sensors we are deploying will actually work the way we intend them to work. And trying to figure out how they work for different environments and what our expectations are is one of the main focus points for the upcoming activities. And so talking a little bit more about the way that we use sensors today and the way that we expect sensors to be used and sensors to provide data in the manners that to fit our expectations. We really need sensors to detect, classify, and geolocate. And so we can state those three things and kind of move on, but there's a lot more to unpack when you start talking about each one of those individually. What does detection mean? So historically, we've detected things at certain points around a signalized intersection, certain points on a freeway, certain points on different points of the roadway that we're interested in. Now we're trying to look at with the sensor data sharing message, we're trying to look at the field of view of what our sensor can see and figure out, okay, what's going on in that entire field of view and how does that impact safety of the traveling public? So for detection, at what range and with what accuracy is required? Um, is detecting is at what range for a large intersection, small intersection, different environments are we expecting the sensor to work and operate? What accuracy? So if we miss detecting an object at a certain range, how 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 much is that? Are we able to allow that to occur? Those missed detections? And the next thing is simply detecting an object that may present a conflict. Is that enough? Really looking at based off of the application that we're trying to support, is is there a need for classification? And is there a need for a classification at certain ranges? And I think about this a lot around the way that camera systems used to work, and they still work. But when we look at a camera with our visual human eye, um, we can see things in the field of view and interpolate things in the field of view that the sensor might not be able to understand or pick up on. For instance, I was thinking about this when I was putting this presentation together, and I was thinking about a use case that we had started to think about when we were thinking about remotely operating airports, small county airports with our UAS center, and they wanted to install 360-degree cameras for remote tower operations, and be able to view and detect conflicts in the air from a certain vantage points. Well, it's really easy if you have a human sitting there looking at the camera to see um, airplanes in the sky, other things in the sky that may maybe pose conflicts to those airplanes taking off and landing. but it's kind of hard to say, okay, camera, I want you to pick out this small pixel in this giant field of view and make sure that you understand that that's an airplane and that or that's another obstacle that may um, conflict with that airplane coming in, and then give me some kind of an alert. So simply detecting an object that may be present may be good enough, but it may not be good enough based off the circumstance. And so that's so in terms of detection, that's what we will be discussing with the upcoming workshop. That's one of the things that we'll get into. Um, the next thing is classification. Excuse me. So when does it become important to classify objects correctly? And what is the accuracy level for that correctness? Is range a factor? So the farther out we go from the sensor's location, do we have a less of an accuracy requirement? And these are all like hypothetical questions. I don't know the answer. These are what we'll be discussing in the workshop. Um, like I mentioned before, is application a factor? If we don't care that it's a person versus a bike versus a wheelchair, and we just say, hey, there's an obstacle in the roadway at 250 meters out, and there's a vehicle coming up onto the object or in close proximity and trajectory with the object. Do we care what that object is, or do we just want to broadcast out, hey, there's something in the roadway that the vehicle may potentially hit? Um, be mindful or be aware. Provide a warning to be able to provide a warning to that vehicle. Or do we need to be specific and say, hey, there's a pedestrian in the roadway. Look out for wheelchairs. Look out for bicyclists. Um, those are all really great questions that I don't have the answers to in terms of classification. I know that as the farther that you go out from the sensor's position, and you're looking downstream or upstream from the roadway, your your ability to detect things with proper classification to get it, whether you're looking with LiDAR or camera-based sensors or radar, your ability to get the number of points or the number of pixels onto that object to do a proper classification declines. So really looking at what is the importance of classification and when is classification necessary and how accurate do we need to be. And then we start talking about geolocating. Um, doesn't do much of good to detect something and classify it if you can't actually broadcast where it's at. Um, but what accuracy there is required too. So we're really looking at three levels of accuracy. Being able to detect things accurately, being able to classify them accurately, and now being able to locate them accurately. Does it matter if that pedestrian's 3 feet from its position that it's being broadcast at, or is 6 feet good? What's the appropriate geolocation difference or measurement? Is it different based off, is the requirements different based off of the environment application, or are there other things that we're going to take into consideration when we talk about geolocation accuracy? And like I've been saying, perhaps there's not a single correct answer. Um, you may have seen the slide, the flyer for the upcoming workshop. There are a lot of different aspects in that flyer, and we'll go through those here in a little bit. But each one of those aspects may present a different answer for how we develop requirements and test cases for sensor certification and sensor system certification. The steps that we're going to take are requirements development. So that's the first meeting that the Shaquille mentioned earlier in this meeting that starts on February 12th. That is where we're going to talk about requirements, develop those requirements. Then we'll look at test case development. Then we'll take those test cases and validate them. And then once those are validated, that will lead to certification. So requirements development. Monthly virtual workshops going to be open to everybody, regardless if you're an OmniAir member or not. We want to get as much participation as we can to get those requirements, the best set of requirements that we can get. It's going to be the second Thursday of each month from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. And like I said before, it's going to start February 12th. And if you are interested in participating, you can email myself or Ryan Hall. Both of our email addresses are on the screen right there. You can email us and you can get that. We can send you out that invitation if you haven't already received it. For the requirements development, we're going to be looking at 4 main environments: large intersections, smaller intersections, freeways, and tolling operations. Those are what I feel are the 4 main areas of interest. There may be different applications, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, that we hone in on for each one of those environments. Right now, I've been thinking about vulnerable road users applications, intersection movement assist, and emergency vehicles. So intersection movement assist with emergency vehicles as well. Applications that deal with non-CVs, so providing ghost or pseudo VSMs or SDSMs for those vehicles that aren't connected. Red light running applications, and then looking for others. That is part of the discussion on which applications should be included within these 4 main environments. And then once we have the applications determined, we can sort of sit down and define, okay, what are the requirements for each one of those applications? And hopefully we see some alignment of application requirements leading to common sensor requirements within each one of those 4 main environments. It's going to be really hard to say, for this application in a large intersection, we need these set of requirements. But for this other application, the requirements change because now you're talking about 2 different sensors. The concept would be, let's get a sensor or sensor system set of requirements for each one of those environments to support the number of priority applications that would be deployed in each one of those environments, so that we can combine applications and functionality into a common set of sensors. That way, IOOs like myself only have to deploy one sensor or one sensor system to take advantage of getting all the information that we're looking to get to support the applications. After we get the requirements done, I'm hoping that the requirements are done in 6 to 8 months. We'll transition over to test case development, and those test cases will be developed based on the requirements. That will occur within the OmniAir subcommittee Tiger team structure, and participation will be restricted to OmniAir members. So that would be the time that if you're not an OmniAir member, it's a good time to join, so that you can take part and have some say and some input in how those test cases are developed. Put Ryan's email address up there again to contact him to join if you're interested. And then for test case validation, in order to validate that the test cases are capable of being performed prior to being incorporated into the certification program, they are trialed at PlugFests. So this is where we're really looking for the vendors and the manufacturers of certain sensors that have a desire to be certified to come to PlugFest, set their sensors up, install them to perform against those certain test cases, and get a good sense of where they fit in. Are they 100% passing all the test cases? Are they at a 90% level? Are they a 60% level? And then that gives them a good feel for, hey, is this the right time for me to apply for certification? We understand certification is costly. It's something that is very much needed from our standpoint, because we don't want to continue at the infrastructure level, at the agency level, to deploy sensors that we think meet our needs, only to find out that they fall short and they're only at a 90%. That limits the ability for us to support those applications that we identified. So coming to the PlugFest gives you the opportunity to test out against the test cases prior to submitting for application for certification. And then once they're validated, the test cases can go through balloting, approval, process to become part of the OmniAir certification program. So not only are we testing your products out at the OmniAir Plug Fest against the test cases, the way that the way that your products perform at the OmniAir Plug Fest also determine if the test cases are structured in the right way, or do we need to modify them? Um, that's very important also because we don't want to have test cases out there that nobody meets or that are hard to accomplish and perform. Test cases should be fairly easy, pretty straightforward to understand. So if you're having problems with performing the test case or passing the test case at a plug fest, it gives OmniAir and us at the subcommittee working group level an idea that, hey, maybe something needs to be modified. Um, so once we have once those test cases go through balloting, they become part of in the approval process, they become part of the certification program. Um, then that certification is limited to OmniAir members, and they can present and apply for their certification. Um, a lot of that will be tied similar to the way that the B2X equipment is currently done. So our requirements in Ohio are that you have to be OmniAir certified in order for a procurement to be made for the state. We are sharing that language with our local communities as well, just to maintain and promote interoperability. We don't want to have challenges down the road of trying to make these systems interoperable and work together. And we feel like OmniAir certification is an assistance to achieving that.
Nick,
Um,
that's a great presentation. Did you have any additional slides?
um, yeah, so this is the one final slide, just to kind of wrap everything together. This is kind of a different format than what you've seen before with the previous announcements of the sensor certification program. So as I talked about, requirements, those are going to be the first things that we work on. That'll transition over the test cases. You can see the applications there and the environments that we're focused on, as well as the benefits to provide IO as a method of measurement sensor quality that then leads to increased transportation safety and also faster deployment and integration. And Jason, I'll take questions if there are any questions.
Well, thank you, Nick, very much. And I would just encourage everyone to enter their questions in the chat box. Let me just start out. As you well know, OmniAir has had certification programs for some of the RF sensors, the the for electronic toll equipment, as well as CV2X OBUs and RSUs. And there's a certain level of trust and interoperability and standards conformance that comes with that. For a connected intersection, which has many different types of sensors working together, what are you currently able to rely on? Is it just vendor representation, or is there anything that you're able to look at currently, and just maybe experience from an IOO in the sensor world?
So I think what we have to go on right now is vendor representation, cut sheets when we talk to the vendors about, what we're trying to do. Um, Sometimes the challenge is the communication, like us clearly identifying what exactly is we're trying to do and what we need, and the environment in which we intend to to deploy the sensor. Um, we don't want to have a intersection. We'll just use intersections for example. We don't want to have an intersection that has 15 cameras trying to capture everything in every angle and every possible, and also in order to capture every possible data set. Um, some of the early on trials that we did, we deployed cameras, and we were looking at deploying a camera to provide ghost BSMs or pseudo BSMs. And the way that we deployed the cameras, or we envisioned deploying the cameras, was the way that we've deployed cameras for 20 years. Um, looking perpendicular up the roadway, and that presented a problem for cameras back then of detecting speed of the vehicle. So, well, you can't broadcast a BSM if you don't know the speed. That's a very important part of the BSM. So the workaround was, well, you got to turn your sensor perpendicular to the roadway instead of looking up the roadway. You got to look at it from a perpendicular um, line of sight. So you're not looking up the roadway, you're looking across the roadway. And that gives you a less of a perspective on what's coming down the roadway towards you. Because now you're just looking at a small segment of the roadway. And while now you're able to get speed, but you're missing out all of the context of what's approaching. So we don't want to have sensors to capture every bit of the all of those data sets. We'd like to have a sensor or sensor system that captures everything that we need with the minimal number of sensors.
Let me just ask one more question before we open it up to the floor. And I see we have some questions in the chat box, but I know that you've been looking at this from a connected intersection environment. We have a lot of tolling members, a lot of tolling agencies that are in OmniAir, and they use a variety of different types of sensors in that tolled facility. Do you expect this initiative will look at requirements for that as well, or just be limited to kind of a connected intersection environment?
Well, I expect that we'll look at intersections. We'll look at freeways because there's different applications for freeways like queue detection and things like that. Um, and then also tolling. I'm not sure. I'm not completely comfortable or aware of what applications our tolling members might be interested in. I know that there's a lot of activity going around their service plazas and toll plazas. Um, what do they need out of a sensor? Those are going to be the questions that we're looking for input from them.
Very good, very good. So I think the message is that we're going to cast a wide net at least during the requirements phase, and see what feedback we get. Let's maybe go to some of the questions in the chat box. We have a question from Ken Yang about LiDAR. Would LiDAR be in the sensors list?
Yeah, that is expected to be one of the sensors. We're looking at potential sensor fusion, understanding that not one type of sensor is the best for every scenario. But if you use multiple different types of sensors in the sensor system and sensor data fusion, you might get the best of every world. So that's one thing that we'll be looking at is how do we combine sensors and is a combination of sensors. We're not going to require, or at least I'm not expecting to require a certain type of sensor to be used for certain applications. That'll be up to the vendors to determine like, hey, what do they feel like their sensor system or sensor suite that they submit for certification or they want to test with, how does that meet all of those requirements? So you got to take into consideration weather and fog and all those environmental conditions as well.
Very good. So Stacy asks if your presentation will be able to be shared. So we typically put the recording on the YouTube site, and if you're comfortable, Nick, we're happy to share your
Yep,
slides.
that's fine. That's great.
Fantastic.
The more the merrier. We want all the participation that we can get.
We will make those available. Just to ask everyone to send a note to Perkinda if you're interested. And a question from Jeff Sal about if some sensors are not working properly, and if this is detected by hardware or software, how does the system mitigate the issue?
So I've been thinking about this quite a bit. This is part of a whole different discussion. Um, but this is more around real-time sensor validation and verification. So this sensor certification program will be the entry point for getting your sensor certified to be installed. Um, so validating that it can actually deliver the requirements that are developed. The sensor, long-term sensor and real-time sensor validation and verification is what I'm envisioning is you're taking multiple different sensors from the environment around and with in which the sensor systems are deployed. So you might have several intersections, or you might have a stretch of freeway where you've deployed different types of sensors up and down the roadway at different varying points. Um, if you have a sensor at one point reporting one thing and then the next sensor down the road doesn't correlate that within a certain amount of time, or if there's sort of overlap, as small it may be, overlap in the sensor field of view, you may be able to use those sensors to deconflict each other or corroborate each other's data. And then if one data set is down, it gives us a better idea of, hey, this data set's not looking as accurate as it once was. That's one thing that I think we as IOs need to do better. We a lot of times we calibrate a sensor, set it and forget it, and assume that, hey, this is going to work forever. Um, and we've largely been able to get away with that for the most part because those sensors are providing data to our own systems for our own operations. But now that we're looking at providing data out to the motoring public, we have to take a different stance on that and start to say, okay, the data, the accuracy of the data that we're sharing is now at an increased importance because we don't want to share bad data with the motoring public because that could also result in something that would decrease safety.
Yeah, great point. Very important. I'm going to ask, that's all the questions in the chat box. Does anyone wish to raise their hand or have additional questions? Oh, here we are, Lori Brady. Uh, Lori, did you want to just ask your question live?
Yeah, sure can. I just wanted to say thanks, Nick. This is a huge effort, and this is probably going to be a committee that goes on and on and on because people will keep adding different kinds of equipment and sensors and things like that for you guys to validate or take a look at. So I was just going to say, as solution providers, and we have many folks that are members of OmniAir that don't only provide equipment but just general solutions, and so then we're held to specific KPIs, but we're very dependent on the equipment that we put in, and sometimes our knowledge is limited only to what that vendor tells us. So this unbiased opinion, I think, is going to go very far, and you're probably going to have a lot of folks join this group. So thank you.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping for increased participation and driving this so that we're having a better sense of what actually is the appropriate type of infrastructure that we should be deploying on our roadways.
Excellent. Do we have anyone else on the call who has wants to raise their hand as a question? Frank, don't be shy. Well, as you can tell from Nick, there are going to be multiple bites of the apple here. We really want as many of you, members and non-members alike, involved. If you know someone who should be part of this effort, please rope them in. We think that casting a wide net's the best way to get requirements. And that kicks off again, is that February 12th, Nick?
February 12th, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern.
3 to 4 p.m. So please carve out time on your calendar for that. And I just wanted to say that this initiative is so important. Too often that we look, stovepiped for C-V2X technology or RFID tolling technology, but we don't really appreciate how in a networked transportation system, these are all connected, and that there are going to be multiple inputs, and to get the full benefits of the connectivity, we need to make sure that we're validating and certifying different types of equipment. So great job, Nick. I'm looking forward to this activity. Well, that concludes our meeting. I'm going to ask Briken to close us out, and thank you all for taking the time to join us today.